My daughter's teacher called me livid and screaming. "Your daughter got another A," Mrs. Holloway said. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the screen. The intensity of her voice made the quiet afternoon feel aggressive. My first thought was that Zara had missed an assignment, but the word she had yelled was, A. "Isn't that good news?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. I was Ella, a 40-year-old single mother and a paralegal, accustomed to maintaining composure under pressure, but this was a new level of irrationality. The silence on the line crackled with Mrs. Holloway's mounting fury before she spat out her rebuttal. "No, Mrs. Johnson, it is not. No black student has ever scored this high in my 23 years of teaching AP calculus. She must be getting help. It is simply impossible." Her words landed like a physical accusation, cold and specific. The air instantly thickened with a familiar, toxic feeling. It was a pattern I had witnessed before, both for myself in college and now, amplified, for my daughter. Excellence, in Zara's case, was not seen as achievement. It was proof of deception, solely because of her race. My meticulous nature, the trait that made me an excellent paralegal, immediately kicked in. I straightened my posture and gripped my pen, the first sign that my initial shock was hardening into methodical, cold anger. I defended my 16-year-old daughter. Zara studies 6 hours every night. Her system is studying. Mrs. Holloway dismissed my defense with a dramatic, audible sigh. "Your daughter finishes too quickly. She knows the material too well. That is impossible. These concepts are extremely advanced. I have been watching her during tests. I even had her solve problems on the board today. She got them right. But she must have memorized the solutions beforehand, or she understands calculus." The sarcasm in her tone was thick and insulting. She spoke the final phrase, "or she understands calculus," as if it were an absurd medical diagnosis. She launched into a detailed list of her surveillance efforts. "Mrs. Johnson, I've separated her from other students, checked her calculator, watched her like a hawk. I can't figure out her system yet, but I will. Everyone needs help with calculus. The white and Asian students ask questions constantly. Your daughter sits there pretending she understands everything." I pushed back, the instinct to protect Zara overriding my fear of confrontation. "Maybe she actually understands, Mrs. Holloway. She doesn't need to ask questions if she already knows the material." Mrs. Holloway then moved to her final, most drastic tactic in this round of the fight. "I'm going to request she take her next unit test in the principal's office alone. No calculator. I need to protect the integrity of my classroom." I didn't argue the point. It was pointless to debate logic with someone whose mind was already made up by prejudice. "Fine," I said, ending the call quickly before my control broke. Zara took the test in isolation a week later. She came home quiet, her focus intense but guarded. I didn't pressure her, knowing the emotional toll Mrs. Holloway's suspicion was taking. A day later, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Holloway again, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "She got another A+, the teacher announced, not as a statement of fact, but as a renewed accusation. "She memorized the test somehow." "How would she do that, Mrs. Johnson?" "I don't know. But there's no other explanation." The sheer absurdity of the claim that Zara was cheating despite being isolated, despite changing tests, despite getting perfect scores, began to transform my anger into a quiet, burning resolution. I knew this was not about academic integrity. It was about power and prejudice. Zara was facing a relentless psychological attack, designed to make her doubt her own brilliance. "I'm changing her to a different test version next time," Holloway threatened. "Do what you need to do," I replied flatly. I realized that my previous strategy of simply defending Zara's work ethic was insufficient. I was fighting a system, or at least a powerful element within it, that was determined to crush my child. When that third test came back, a completely new version, Zara scored another A+. The next call from Mrs. Holloway was the most chilling yet. "I'm recommending she be removed from AP Calculus for getting perfect scores for academic dishonesty. It's disrupting the other students. They're questioning why they can't score as high." My filter snapped. "Maybe because my daughter's smarter than them, Mrs. Holloway," I said. It was a direct, purposeful insult. A way to test the boundaries of her prejudice. She stumbled, then recovered, circling back to the core bias. "Mrs. Johnson, I know you want to believe your daughter is gifted. But I've taught hundreds of students. I know when something's not right. Either she's cheating, or I must be giving her special treatment. And she must be cheating because she's black." I finished for her. "I didn't say that," she insisted, too quickly. "You said no black student has scored this high in 23 years. I reminded her, keeping my voice low and steady. "That's just a fact. Did you accuse the black students who struggled of cheating when they did poorly? Did you accuse them when they did well?" Silence. I ended the call, my hand shaking not from fear, but from the realization that this personal battle was about to become a war for accountability. I had to move beyond defense. My meticulously organized mind, trained to collect evidence and build a case, saw the task ahead clearly. I started a new file on my computer, documenting every time and date, every quote, and every voicemail. This round ended in a stalemate, with Mrs. Holloway planning her ultimate attack, removing Zara from the class, and me preparing my evidence for the next phase. Holloway's threat to recommend Zara's removal from AP Calculus was the final alarm bell. It fueled my initial fear, forcing me to move past defense and into investigation. I had spent the last 2 weeks simply reacting to her accusations. But now I had to find a pattern, an external leverage point that the administration could not ignore. The only way to save Zara was to prove the problem was not her, but Holloway herself. The first step was attending the school board meetings. I sat in the back, meticulously observing the formalities and the participants. The principal, Mr. Yates, was always present. A man whose default setting seemed to be detached professionalism. I realized quickly that my solo complaints about Zara would always be filtered through his deference to Holloway's 23 years of seniority. Holloway had cited her experience and the fact that no black student has ever achieved Zara's scores. I decided to test that fact. Working through the school's publicly available records and a few discreet contacts I'd built up through my paralegal job, I began quietly compiling a list of high-achieving black students who had taken advanced math in the last decade. It was difficult, but names began to surface. 3 in particular stood out, all of whom had left Holloway's class under a cloud of academic doubt. Destiny Williams, accused of plagiarism in pre-calculus and moved to regular math. Jordan Davis, accused of copying homework and subsequently dropped the course entirely. And Malik Turner, who had been subjected to such frequent, stressful testing in isolation that his family had eventually switched schools because he developed debilitating anxiety. The discovery was a chilling confirmation. Holloway was not simply a difficult teacher, she was an institutional barrier, a gatekeeper guarding the perception of who belonged in her advanced classroom. My fear for Zara began to transform into a righteous, cold fury against systemic injustice. I reached out to the Williams and Davis families first. I called Destiny's mother, Marina, and Jordan's father, Reed. The first meetings were cautious. We sat in a neutral coffee shop, exchanging pleasantries before I laid out my case, showing them my notes on Holloway's exact phrasings. Doesn't ask questions. Finishes too quickly. Must be getting help. Marina's face went pale as she listened. The exact same phrases. She whispered, shaking her head. I felt like I was being difficult, like I was the one who couldn't handle the rigor. Reed, a quiet, broad-shouldered man, confirmed their experience with Jordan. He stopped sleeping. He said the only time he felt safe was when he was in another teacher's classroom. He lost 2 years of high-level math because of her. The realization that their children had endured the same toxic pattern, the same gaslighting by an authority figure, forged an immediate and potent solidarity between us. The fight was no longer just about Zara. It was about Destiny, Jordan, Malik, and every black student who would follow. The conflict expanded from a personal defense to a collective challenge. Armed with this coalition, I sought a meeting with Principal Yates, bringing Marina and Reed with me. We presented our findings methodically, showing the timeline of accusations against 4 different students over multiple years. Mr. Yates listened, drumming his fingers lightly on his desk, his expression unchanging. When we finished, he leaned back. Mrs. Holloway is our most experienced math teacher, Mrs. Johnson. If she has concerns, they are valid. She is merely being thorough in maintaining academic standards. Her only concern is that my daughter is black and good at math, I stated, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. Yates winced visibly. That is a serious accusation, Ella. We cannot simply dismiss a dedicated educator based on what amounts to circumstantial comparisons. So is accusing my daughter of cheating with no evidence, I countered. You are protecting a pattern of discrimination, Mr. Yates. And you are allowing this woman to destroy the confidence of talented students. He conceded nothing. He maintained that Holloway's concerns were valid, that she was just being thorough, and that without concrete proof of external malice, he could not intervene in her classroom management. The institutional gate had slammed shut. As we left the office, frustration threatened to consume me. We had the pattern, but the system refused to recognize it. Reed put a hand on my shoulder. We tried the polite route, he said. Now we know what we're up against. The emotional shift was complete. My initial fear had been replaced by a cold, determined resolve. The polite route was exhausted. We had built a coalition, but the institutional pattern remained. I needed undeniable, external proof of Zara's excellence that bypassed the entire school system. I needed something that would make Holloway's accusations not just wrong, but absurd. The mounting evidence of a discriminatory pattern provided the context we needed. But Principal Yates had made it clear that institutional proof required something more. We needed undeniable, external validation that completely destroyed the foundation of Mrs. Holloway's cheating claims. I realized the answer lay with Zara's own quiet brilliance. I spoke to Zara about the International Math Olympiad qualifier exam. It was an intense, nationally recognized standardized test, externally proctored and filmed, designed to identify top mathematical talent. No subjective grading. No isolated testing needed. The results would be irrefutable. Zara, though initially hesitant due to the sheer pressure she felt, saw the logic immediately. It was a chance to use the one thing Holloway couldn't deny: her raw talent, to silence the accusations for good. She registered immediately. Mrs. Holloway found out about the registration almost instantly. She called me, her voice sharp with panic hidden behind a veneer of pedagogical concern. "She can't take that exam, Mrs. Johnson. I forbid it as her teacher." "Why not?" I asked, my voice dangerously even. "I thought you were certain she was cheating." "This exam is externally proctored. It's the definition of academic integrity." "She's not ready," Holloway insisted, her voice tight. "It will hurt her confidence when she fails, and that failure will reflect badly on my teaching." I seized on the contradiction. "Wait. If she's cheating, how would her failure reflect on you? Surely her failure would simply prove you right. Or is the possibility that she might actually succeed and expose your bias the real fear here?" She stammered, unable to form a coherent response. "I meant I just don't think she should take it. I just don't." But her resistance was futile. This was a standardized test, beyond her control. I hung up feeling a wave of triumph and cynical satisfaction. She had dug her own hole. If Zara failed, Holloway was justified. If Zara excelled, Holloway's year-long campaign of suspicion would be exposed as baseless prejudice. The exam day came and went. Zara was nervous, but focused. She emerged from the testing center with her usual quiet intensity. We waited an agonizing 3 weeks for the results. When the email arrived, the news was overwhelming. Zara had scored in the top 5 for our state, the only student from our school to qualify for nationals. It was the irrefutable, external validation we had desperately needed. I felt a surge of pure triumph. A moment where the injustice we had endured finally translated into a quantifiable, public victory. The local newspaper quickly picked up the story, eager to celebrate a local academic success story. The reporter called the high school, naturally seeking comment from Zara's AP calculus teacher, Mrs. Holloway. The resulting article was a masterpiece of institutional hypocrisy. I read the quoted lines twice, feeling a twist of bitter laughter in my chest. "I always knew Zara was special," Mrs. Holloway told the reporter, her voice dripping with counterfeit pride. "I pushed her hard because I saw her potential. Some teachers might have doubted her, but I never did. I gave her extra challenges to nurture her talent." It was a stunning reversal. The woman who had fought tooth and nail to have Zara removed for cheating was now publicly claiming credit for Zara's genius. The article quoted her extensively, painting her as a visionary educator who had championed her star student. Within days, the school district superintendent called Mrs. Holloway personally to congratulate her on Zara's success. Word spread that Holloway was now being considered for the Teacher of the Year award. The irony was suffocating. She was achieving career validation, based on the very student she had tried to ruin. The triumph of the Olympiad was now tainted by her cynical performance. Holloway had weaponized Zara's success by twisting the narrative, securing herself a Teacher of the Year nomination. This moment of extreme hypocrisy was the final trigger. I knew the time for quiet collecting evidence was over. I had to use my documentation to cut through the facade of her lies. The polite path was exhausted, and my methodical, evidence-based fury was ready for deployment. The false praise misses Holloway gave the newspaper reporter was the final straw. I knew the time for quiet diplomacy was over. I could not stand by, while she claimed credit for the very excellence she had tried to dismantle, simultaneously securing herself a Teacher of the Year nomination. This blatant hypocrisy proved that her malice was protected by institutional denial, and that only undeniable evidence, presented strategically, would force action. I sat down at my laptop that evening, pulling up the file I had maintained since the very first phone call. This was the moment for my methodical, paralegal training to take over. I didn't write an emotional letter or an angry screed. I simply acted as a filter, collating the proof. I retrieved every accusatory email where Holloway suggested cheating, every transcript of the voicemails she had left, and every note documenting her claims that no black student has ever scored this high. I arranged the documentation chronologically, a clear timeline of escalating prejudice and baseless suspicion. I retrieved every accusatory email where Holloway suggested cheating, every transcript of the voicemails she had left, and every note documenting her claims that no black student has ever scored this high. I arranged the documentation chronologically, a clear timeline of escalating prejudice and baseless suspicion. I also included the recent newspaper clipping, the one where she claimed Zara was her star pupil. I attached the full folder to a single, professional email addressed directly to the district superintendent, Dr. Pearson. The subject line was concise: formal complaint and evidence of racial bias regarding AP Calculus teacher Rebecca Holloway. I hit send, a deep breath leaving my lungs as the digital weight of months of fear and documentation flew across the wire. It felt like a point of no return. Within the hour, my phone buzzed. It was Dr. Pearson's assistant. They confirmed receipt of the voluminous attachment and requested a meeting for the next morning. The immediate response told me that the volume and gravity of the evidence had achieved the necessary shock value. The superintendent himself could not ignore this. I spent that evening organizing the physical proof. I printed copies of everything: the emails, the voicemails, the notes about the isolation tests, even the local newspaper article with Holloway's sanctimonious quotes. My hands were shaking as I sorted through the pile, realizing the sheer quantity of time and energy Holloway had spent trying to tear down my daughter. Each printed page felt heavy, proof of what Zara had endured, while I had been trying to work within a polite system. The fear and anger I had been carrying transformed into a quiet, resolved exhaustion. The next morning, I met Dr. Pearson in his spacious but impersonal office. He was a distinguished man, but his professional demeanor shifted visibly as he reviewed the stack of papers I placed before him. He started with the most recent, the newspaper article. Then he moved to the first voicemail transcript, the one where Holloway had been livid, that Zara got an A. His professional interest slowly shifted to visible discomfort. He scanned the pages, his eyes skipping from one accusation to the next, finally resting on the pattern of complaints about Destiny Williams and Jordan Davis I had included. "Mrs. Johnson," he said slowly, looking up. "This is substantial. I am afraid this falls well outside the scope of a simple classroom management concern." He apologized directly to me, acknowledging that the district had failed to investigate the pattern earlier. The sound of that formal admission brought a wave of painful, long, delayed relief. He asked permission to forward everything to the district's compliance officer, explaining that this fell under their official discrimination investigation protocols. I agreed immediately. The institutional conflict had officially begun its movement into an external process, signaling that the era of Principal Yates's dismissals was over. That same afternoon, a woman named Diane Hitt, the compliance officer, called me. Her voice was calm, professional, and thorough. She scheduled a formal, lengthy interview and explained the process. The investigation would take several weeks, and I needed to maintain strict confidentiality while they gathered information from multiple sources. Hearing her use terms like formal interview and discrimination investigation protocols brought a small wave of relief, followed immediately by the tense anticipation of what the inquiry would uncover and what the outcome would be. My focused action was complete, and now, the fate of the complaint rested in the hands of the bureaucratic process. With the investigation officially underway, the narrative shifted from my singular effort to the quiet, methodical work of justice. For the first time in months, I felt a strange mixture of relief and consuming anxiety. Holloway was still teaching, still in Zara's classroom, and every day she spent there felt like a small risk. Zara, however, noticed the shift immediately. "Mrs. Holloway seems distracted," she reported one afternoon, carefully stacking her calculus books. "Nervous. She barely made eye contact with anyone today." The change, subtle as it was, suggested the internal pressure of the district's scrutiny was already having an effect. Diane Whitt, the district compliance officer, scheduled a 2-hour formal interview with me. We met in a sterile conference room at the district office, and she recorded everything, taking detailed, precise notes about each incident I described. She asked specifically about the other Black students Mrs. Holloway had mentioned, and I provided contact information for Marina, Reed, and the other families. I knew the single most powerful thing I had done was build that coalition, turning a single complaint into evidence of a systemic pattern. Over the next week, Diane contacted Marina and Reed. Marina called me excitedly to report that someone was finally taking their experiences seriously, something she and Destiny had given up hope of years ago. Reed told me he had broken down crying during his interview because he had felt so powerless watching Jordan suffer the same ordeal we were now fighting. Their validation was crucial. It confirmed that our advocacy was not just a personal fight, but a necessary correction. But the evidence didn't stop there. Through her thorough, multi-sourced investigation, Diane also uncovered 3 white parents who came forward, volunteering information that they felt uncomfortable with how Mrs. Holloway spoke about Black students. Their testimony, coming from within the privileged group, Holloway usually protected, added undeniable weight to the claim that her bias was visible and pervasive. Then, the true institutional change began. Mrs. Holloway was placed on paid administrative leave, pending the investigation outcome. A substitute teacher took over her AP Calculus class. Zara came home glowing the day the substitute started. "His name is Mr. Williams," she told me, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. "He's encouraging and supportive. He treats every student with respect." The simple act of being treated as a capable mathematician, rather than a suspicious interloper, highlighted just how abnormal Mrs. Holloway's behavior had been. That wave of relief I felt was immense. Zara was safe, at least for now. And the primary antagonist was neutralized in the classroom. The newspaper reporter who had previously interviewed Holloway about her star student contacted the district, asking for comment on the sudden leave of absence. The district released a brief statement about reviewing concerns regarding a teacher, protecting Holloway's privacy for the time being. The investigation continued to expand. I received an anonymous email from someone claiming to be Holloway's former colleague. The email described similar patterns of discrimination with Black students over the years. Patterns that previous administrators had ignored or dismissed. The person was afraid to come forward publicly, but wanted me to know this pattern had been happening for a long time. I forwarded the email to Diane Hitt, who scheduled a follow-up interview to discuss the new lead. I suggested she speak with more current and former students directly, including the white parents who had come forward. The investigation quickly expanded to include dozens of interviews, and a clear pattern of treating Black students with suspicion while praising the same achievements in white and Asian students emerged. Mrs. Holloway, now on paid leave, was formally interviewed by Diane 3 weeks in. According to a brief summary I later received, Holloway staunchly defended her actions, insisting she was only maintaining academic standards and treating all students equally. Her refusal to acknowledge the harm she caused only strengthened my resolve. The battle for justice was moving to its peak, and I knew the most critical phase, the final decision and the policy changes, was just ahead. The time for the Math Olympiad Nationals arrived, providing a necessary distraction as the investigation continued in the district offices. Zara, traveling with the state team, was finally able to be around mathematically gifted students who respected her abilities, without question. Being in that environment, where her talent was the default and not the exception, began the slow, essential work of healing the damage Holloway had inflicted. Though she did not place in the top 10 nationally, the experience itself was a profound victory against the self-doubt that had begun to creep into her mind. While Zara was away, Marina, Reed, and I attended the public comment period before the school board meeting. Each of us spoke for 3 minutes about our children's experiences. We were calm but firm, laying out the timeline of accusations, the emotional cost, and the clear pattern of racial bias. Speaking publicly, knowing every word was now part of the public record, was a moment of release for all of us. We had been dismissed, ignored, and gaslit by the administration, and this was our chance to make the harm visible. The board didn't make an immediate decision, but they scheduled a follow-up session for 2 weeks later. The board president acknowledged that the investigation revealed concerning patterns that required careful consideration and appropriate response. The institution was finally forced to admit that something was fundamentally wrong. Mrs. Holloway's lawyer sent a letter threatening legal action if she was terminated. The letter argued her teaching methods were protected by academic freedom and claimed the investigation was biased. For a moment, I felt a flicker of fear that the system would still protect her. But the district's legal team reviewed Diane Heat's strong evidence and determined the discrimination case was solid enough to withstand challenge. Meanwhile, the toll on Zara was clear. As the school year wound down, she struggled with anxiety. She had nightmares about being accused of cheating again, a recurring dread that made her feel she had to constantly prove herself. I found her a therapist who specialized in helping students of color process experiences with racism in educational settings. During one session, she admitted, "I started doubting my own abilities, Mom. I thought, what if she's right? What if I'm just lucky? Or what if I did memorize it?" Hearing my brilliant daughter articulate the fear that her own worth was conditional broke my heart and strengthened my resolve to see the process through. The institutional battle was almost won, but the personal healing was just beginning. 4 weeks after the investigation began, Diane Heat completed her report and submitted it to the superintendent with recommendations. She found substantial evidence of discriminatory treatment based on race and recommended formal disciplinary action. Dr. Pearson scheduled another meeting with me to discuss the findings before making them public. He acknowledged the district failed these students by not investigating the pattern earlier and offered a direct, formal apology for the harm caused to Zara and the other families. He then detailed the outcome. Mrs. Holloway would face formal reprimand, mandatory bias training, loss of her AP Calculus assignment, she would never teach advanced students again, and 2 years probationary status, with regular classroom observations. She wouldn't be fired due to tenure and union contract requirements, a frustrating, bureaucratic barrier. But her career advancement was effectively ended. The Teacher of the Year nomination was withdrawn, and the formal letter documenting the discriminatory pattern became part of her permanent employment record. I felt deeply conflicted. A part of me wanted her fired completely, removed from the classroom forever. Dr. Pearson assured me that the probationary status meant any future complaints would result in immediate termination proceedings. We had achieved accountability and professional neutralization, even if not complete expulsion. More importantly, the school board voted to implement new, preventative policies. This was the true systemic victory. They required mandatory bias training for all teachers, a formal process for students and families to report discriminatory treatment without fear of retaliation, and the establishment of a review committee to examine historical discipline and academic tracking data for racial disparities. Marina, Reed, and I met with the superintendent to discuss the enforcement of these new policies. He committed to quarterly public reports on implementation progress. Our advocacy hadn't just removed a bad actor. It had created a framework to protect future students. We had forced the institution to respond to discrimination it had preferred to ignore for decades. The institutional conflict was partially resolved through this policy change and professional demotion, bringing a sense of mixed resolution to a very long battle. The battle was won in the boardroom, but the lasting impact on Zara and the system required sustained attention. A commitment to ensuring the policies we fought for actually changed behavior. Zara finished the school year with straight A grades, culminating in an A+ in AP Calculus under the encouraging substitute teacher. The final, external validation arrived when she took the official AP exam and scored a 5, the highest possible score. Weeks later, the thick envelope arrived from her top choice university. She was accepted with a full tuition scholarship. These were relief tears, validation tears. The acceptance proved what Holloway had tried to deny. Zara belonged in advanced mathematics. Mrs. Holloway submitted a brief, written apology as part of her disciplinary agreement. It was short, and didn't really acknowledge the specific harm she caused. It felt empty. A gesture written to satisfy a requirement, rather than genuine remorse. I read it once and put it in a drawer, deciding it would be more hurtful than healing to show Zara such a hollow statement. Holloway resigned shortly thereafter. She cited personal reasons, but everyone involved understood she was leaving rather than continue teaching under constant observation. She transferred to teaching regular geometry classes at a different high school in the district, moving away from advanced students. The district, committed to the new policies, posted job openings for 2 new math teachers. For the first time, parent representatives, including me, served on the hiring committee. We asked every candidate specific questions about supporting students of color and how they would challenge their own biases about who belongs in advanced math. We hired 2 candidates who demonstrated not just skill, but an explicit belief that all students could excel regardless of race. They had something more important than Holloway's decades of experience. They had equity and genuine support in their core philosophy. This commitment began to change the culture immediately. Registration for Zara's senior year AP Calculus class showed something I had never seen before: 12 black students enrolled. The previous year, Zara had been one of 3. Families who had kept their children in regular math because they didn't trust the advanced system were willing to try again, knowing Mrs. Holloway was gone, and the new teachers had equity training. Seeing those enrollment numbers felt like watching the trajectory of the system shift. Zara herself found a profound sense of restorative purpose. That summer, she enrolled in a mathematics program for gifted high school students at a nearby university. The environment celebrated her abilities rather than questioned them. She came home energized instead of drained. She also volunteered to mentor younger students interested in competition mathematics, meeting with them twice a month. It felt important to create the supportive environment I wished I'd had from the beginning, she told me. Watching her help a nervous freshman work through a complex proof, I saw her transform her pain into purpose. She was using her experience to help others avoid the doubt she had endured. She became the encouraging voice she had needed during her junior year. The system continued to move forward. The district's Data Review Committee released its first report, showing significant racial disparities in AP course enrollment, confirming what we already knew. I accepted an invitation from Dr. Pearson to join the Equity Advisory Committee as a parent representative. The work of changing systems required sustained attention, and I committed to keep showing up. Marina called me excitedly one afternoon in late August. Destiny, who had been pushed out of advanced math years ago, had decided to return to advanced math classes for her senior year, feeling confident the new policies would protect her. Marina's voice shook with emotion. This felt like a meaningful victory, proof that our work was protecting and restoring the chances of other students. Reed called a few days later with different news. Jordan chose to stay in regular math, thriving in history and literature instead. Not every student wants to return to the environment where they were harmed, and that was valid too. Our advocacy had given him the safety to choose his own path, rather than being forced out of his path. The final victory wasn't just about forcing an academic outcome. It was about protecting our children's ability to choose, confident in their worth. The journey had culminated not in a victory over one teacher, but in Zara's unshakable confidence and the promise of a changed environment for others. My focus now shifted from the school district's politics to the more immediate work of ensuring that this hard-won stability was lasting. I joined the district's Equity Advisory Committee, meeting monthly to review data and propose reforms. My most important action outside the district, however, was speaking at a parent meeting about advocacy. I almost said no, terrified of public speaking, but Marina convinced me that other families needed to hear what we had learned. I stood before 50 parents, presenting my carefully constructed timeline of Holloway's accusations, emphasizing the need to document everything, every email, every phone call, every meeting, in writing. I stressed that the system counts on parents giving up. So refusing to give up is the most powerful thing you can do. The conversations afterward confirmed that Holloway was merely one manifestation of a much wider problem across the district. Graduation day arrived with clear skies. Zara finished as valedictorian with a perfect 4.0 GPA. Her speech was about perseverance when people doubt you, about proving yourself through excellence, and about not letting other people's limited expectations define what you are capable of achieving. She never said Mrs. Holloway's name, but everyone who knew the story understood exactly who she meant. When she finished, the audience stood and applauded for almost a minute. I cried watching her, thinking about everything she had survived to reach that moment. After the ceremony, Marina, Reed, and I sat together, watching our children receive their diplomas. Destiny walked with her head held high, Jordan smiled broadly, and Zara walked with quiet confidence, shaking hands with the principal and superintendent who had finally listened. We acknowledged that we had protected future students from enduring what our children had. We had created accountability where none existed before. The summer before college, Zara continued to mentor younger students of color in a math program, working to build their confidence. One evening, she told me that helping younger students see themselves as mathematicians felt like taking something painful and transforming it into something with purpose. In early August, I received a message through social media from Malik Turner's mother. She said Malik was thriving at his new school and had decided to major in computer science in college. She wrote that seeing consequences for Mrs. Holloway's actions had given them a sense of closure they didn't know they needed. Her message was a profound reminder that the impact of our advocacy extended beyond our immediate circle. Zara and I packed her boxes, preparing for college move in day. I asked her what she had learned from everything with Holloway. She said, "I learned that doing excellent work is the best way to answer people who doubted me. But I also learned I shouldn't have to work twice as hard just to be seen as half as good because of my skin color." She said proving herself over and over got exhausting, and future students shouldn't have to go through what she did. A thick envelope arrived from the new AP Calculus teacher 6 days before move-in. It was a handwritten letter thanking Zara for her leadership and for setting a standard of excellence that inspired the whole class. It was a tangible piece of evidence that the culture in that classroom had finally changed. On move-in day, the college dorm parking lot was chaos. Zara's roommate arrived an hour after us. Within 10 minutes, they were comparing favorite theorems and debating integration problems. They were both studying mathematics and shared the same passion. 3 days into the semester, my phone buzzed with a text from Zara. She had just finished her first college calculus class. She wrote that the professor was brilliant and encouraging, treating every student like a capable mathematician. Her final text was a single, profound sentence. Learning was supposed to feel like this. It was the ultimate, hard-won truth. Zara had arrived exactly where she belonged, ready to excel without anyone questioning whether she deserved to be there. I took her acceptance letter and scholarship offer to a frame shop the next day, choosing a simple black frame. The framed letter went on the living room wall. It served as a physical reminder that Zara's abilities were never in question, despite the attempts to undermine her confidence. Every time I walked past that frame, I felt grateful we had fought back instead of accepting Mrs. Holloway's judgment. The external validation from a prestigious university felt like the final, definitive word.